Okay. Good morning. Good morning, everybody. Good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, rather. Very pleased to welcome you to Thursday afternoon's Cuppa Club, and we're very, very fortunate to have Billy from East Marsh United, which is the community group behind East Marsh Community, which is the offer that share offer that we're talking about today. And we're also very lucky to have Ben from Resonance, who are a key player in supporting organisations like East Marsh. My name's Paul Pizzala, and I'm an investment manager at Ethex, and have been working with Billy and Ben to get the offer onto the platform. So before we start getting into the details and a bit of the background about East Marsh Community, there is some housekeeping. And firstly, I need to let you know that what we're about to say doesn't constitute financial advice. And if you do need financial advice, please do speak to your financial advisor. Secondly, that the event is being recorded today, and we'll follow up with an email and a link to the recording and documents. And I really do, feel free to ask questions. All questions are good. You can post them in the chat box, and then we'll pick them up as they come through in the conversation. And finally, we are aiming for a call of around 30 minutes to 45 minutes, probably 30 minutes. Normally we have two offers on the call to talk, two companies on the call to talk about their offers. So hopefully 30 minutes will be enough to really kind of get into the context and the detail of the offer. So without further ado, Billy, may I ask you to introduce yourself?
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for putting all this together, Paul. I am Billy Dazine, and I am chair of East Marsh United, the community group in the East Marsh that who the CBS, the Community Benefit Society, is called East Marsh Community. So it's just another arm of our operation here on the East Marsh of Grimsby.
Perfect. Thanks, Billy. And Ben?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for attending, and hope this is interesting for you all. So I work with Resonance Limited. We're a property impact fund manager, about £300 million now under management. And as I said, yes, a lot of that is property which we buy, refurbish to a really high standard, and goes to charity partners, so they can provide a good base, a stable base and accommodation for the people they work with, so they can hopefully flourish.
Fantastic. That's great. Thanks, Ben. I just thought it'd be worth outlining some of the details of the offer before we get stuck into the questions. And we're looking for a minimum raise of 250,000 with a target of 500,000, and that's to buy 10 homes and renovate them. Currently, the raise is up to 120, so going very well. We are looking to benefit from matched funding, so an additional 25k in matched funding. So if for instance, if you put in 25k, that 25k will be matched by matched funding. We have a forecast interest rate of 4%, which Ben's going to touch on some of the financial details and the modelling behind that. And just to remind everybody, that's a fair return, based on the highly impactful work that East Marsh is doing as a community benefit society. So, Billy, I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about the backstory of East Marsh United. How it's developed to get to this stage where you're ready to launch the share offer. Maybe to help us locate where East Marsh is? You know, where is Grimsby, and where is East Marsh in relation to Grimsby?
Grimsby is on the River Humber, just below Hull, about halfway up and on the right in the UK. And we were at one point the biggest fishing port in the world, and actually the disappearance of the fishing industry, you know, similar to mining and steel, a single industry town, has had a big effect on the places and the people around here. So the East Marsh itself is one of 15 wards in Grimsby. Obviously, it's the heart of Great Grimsby. On the right is the border to Cleethorpes, so a seaside oasis, and on the left, the West Marsh, because that word marsh is important. We were all built on marshes. The marshes were drained so that houses and shops and so on could be built to service the fishing industry in the middle of the last century. So the East Marsh itself encloses much of the docks area to the top end of the East Marsh. So we've kind of got the River Humber flowing along the edges of our consciousness here.
Brilliant. That's really helpful. So interesting that, you know, sort of quite a typical story in a way about sort of British industry locating overseas or losing out to competition overseas, and there's sort of like a big gap to fill. There's obviously the immediate impacts of buying houses, doing them up and renting them out to, you know, affordably, good quality, affordable houses. But you're also creating good quality neighborhoods, and that has a social and an economic multiplier, to use the jargon. I mean, could you tell us about that a little bit more in, say, human terms, and how that, you know, changes the fabric of a place?
In human terms, I would just, first of all, I'll just share a link to our projects mind map, which might help people focus on the extent of the things that we do. But that's something that's grown over the last 5 years. And I guess, you know, I mean, I grew up here. I'm bizarrely, in my mind, I was actually born about 2 feet away from where I'm sat here. I've kind of been away and come back at various times, but this is where I'm sat right now. And so I was here when the fishing was at its peak, and almost every single household here was connected to the fishing in some way. You know, you could see women doing the braiding of nets through as you walk down the street, you know, through the front windows. So when the fishing went away, and obviously with the impact of austerity on top, I think it's just left generations of people without a purpose, without meaning, without structure, and really without hope, I think. So what we've done is, you know, if I could talk about actually how we started, because the people who started East Marsh United, including myself, have no sort of background in community work or joining things even, really. And in the summer of 2017, things had got to a very bad pass after all this time, no fishing, austerity and so on, that what we now come to understand as county lines gangs had taken over and were kind of on the next block from here. 20 or 30 young scowling men were kind of openly dealing drugs, and there was lots of violence and arson and intimidation associated with it. So that ultimately it prompted a local meeting with the councillor and the community cop and the robo-cop, and 60 or 70 really angry local people. And they were just kind of shouting at the front at the stage, and there was no answers. So I don't know where it came from, but I just kind of stood up and started talking about broken windows theory, and the idea that maybe there's no white charger coming over the hill, and maybe it's up to us to do something about this. Now, broken windows theory at its basis says that if you allow the smallest of infractions, like, for instance, litter, dog mess, glass, and so on around the streets, then it will escalate to, you know, broken windows and other kinds of damage around the streets, like fly tipping everywhere and all that sort of stuff. So, and this is compounded by problems with the council selling off their housing stock in the early noughties, which made a really big turnover of people in and out of the East Marsh. So essentially, I just kind of offered to put together a workshop where we'd look at the problems. 15 people came along and East Marsh United was born. And what we did, we didn't know how to do this. We just knew we wanted to do something. And so we literally went out on the streets on the Saturday morning with a big boom box to draw attention to what we were doing, and cleaned the street. And then the next Saturday we cleaned another and another. And we did that for, what, a year and a half, I think, until people felt exhausted by it and other issues were coming up. But the really important thing was that we sat together every Thursday evening for 2 hours talking about our experience of life here and what the problems are in an honest and open way, and what the solutions were, more importantly. And we're very solution focused, actually. And you can see from the project map that that's brought us to a number of projects, because what we realized, it can't just be one thing, because it's the threads and the infrastructure of people's lives. So it's everything all at once, all the time. So we've ended up with projects in community arts, projects in community education, sports, health and well-being, and 3 big infrastructure projects that we're working on developing.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. That's fantastic answer. So good, you know, to hear where the energy for United and East Marsh Community have come from. We're already getting quite a few questions, actually, some technical questions, which I might aim at Ben, but before that, Ben, what was it that, you know, why is it that residents has chosen to support East Marsh? And I mean, you've done these types of projects many times over the years, and you have a long track record. So, really interested to hear about it, you know, more from that sort of commercial business building perspective.
Yeah, absolutely, Paul. Thank you. So, our residents, as I said earlier, you know, we invest effectively in a lot of charity partners. They can support people, you know, with all sorts of issues, from homelessness, people who are vulnerably housed, people recovering from addiction to drugs and alcohol, women seeking refuge from abusive relationships, and so on. And all the partners we invest in, you know, we look for, you know, the normal things you would, you know, credibility, competence of the management teams, sensible ambitions to scale, track record, and so on. And at residents, we also are very focused on community assets, helping groups and organisations like East Marsh own the assets they need in their communities for the long term, for, you know, in perpetuity, to benefit the people in those areas. And I work directly with those sorts of community groups, and we look for exactly the same things. We look for a passionate, credible management team. You know, I've met the team in Grimsby and can vouch for that. Track record, where I know the East Marsh have already got 3 homes that they've owned that have been refurbished to a really high quality and are being let at affordable rates to local families. Importantly, with really close support from North East Lincolnshire Council and the housing officer there, helping them acquire those homes, and we'll be helping them acquire the next tranche of homes when we pull in money from the share offer. And they've got really exciting plans, but prudent and sensible plans to scale up. You know, we're asking for investors to support us at this stage with £500,000, so we can go from the 3 current homes to 13. But that's just the start, and Billy will tell us more about that later on.
Brilliant. I do have actually a technical question here, which says how much will the rent be, and how will it compare to the local market? I mean, you don't necessarily have to go into pounds, shillings, and pence, but if you can give us a a feel for where you are versus what a private landlord might charge. That's helpful.
Yeah, I did see that question come up. So I've already pulled up the model, and yeah, quite easy to answer. So properties, and as I said, there's 3 properties already being let, and they're being let at affordable rates. So that's the local housing allowance. So, for example, 99 quid a week for a 2-bedroom house, and 104 for a 3-bedroom house, and that's just based on local rates anyone can find on the website for that.
Yeah, thanks, Ben. And Billy, you were telling me, you know, earlier in our conversations about, you know, the experience that families have with private landlords, and sometimes it isn't always the best experience for all sorts of different reasons. I certainly don't want to cast private landlords as the villains. That's absolutely not our intention. But sometimes having a local landlord who's passionate about the community can be a better all-round deal. And just be interested to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, it would be too easy just to put landlords in a box and say, oh, all bad. It's not true. And for the most part, because there was a big council housing stock on the East Marsh for years, and they were sold off, and the internet was running then, and people just bought them as investments. We're encouraged to do this, and it's very sensible to have rainy day money and everything, but they're all over the country, indeed all over the world. And they've never been to Grimsby, and very often they get stuck into negative equity because they've bought these houses for what they're told is really cheap, and it is, if you live in London, you know, 60,000–70,000 pounds for a 3-bedroom terraced house. Wow, that's fantastic, but they're only selling for 35,000 to 40,000, and so they can't get their investment back on that. And so they end up sort of not doing anything with them. And we've got a whole tranche of kind of boarded up properties and things out here that are obviously not being used for their purpose to provide a home for human beings. And they're a blight on the actual neighborhood, you know. So we're interested, yes, in homes. This is really, really important. Our housing project is our big #1 central priority, but we've also got these other projects around us that are to do with engagement, to do with street architecture, how it looks out here, because it's a really, really simple belief that underpins this, that the people of the East Marsh just want the same kinds of lives that everybody else on the planet wants, basically. You know, nice house, nice streets, nice neighbours, and a little bit of money in the pocket, and off we go. And people can look after themselves from that point.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for that. I just on the question of what does good quality housing actually mean? And we've got a question here saying, I read that you will be bringing properties up to an EPC level of C. Given that the energy crisis is unlikely to abate anytime soon, are you revisiting that decision? Are the properties you're looking at capable of hitting higher ratings? You know, very, very good, timely question, which I imagine that must be at the front of a lot of people's minds at the moment, how to square the energy bills with everything else. Sort of what it's question for Ben, question for Billy. It's open to your thoughts on that.
For me, generally, I'd just say that it is a really good question. We have to adapt to the needs of our planet and make sure that we tie in completely and totally with that, so that we can live, you know, in concert with nature rather than dominating nature. But these are things that we'll be working out as we go along. But it is our intention to live very closely in terms of green and people-centered issues. And unfortunately, I think both of those things have been neglected over the years. So Ben will have more technical detail about this than I, but as a broad intention, these are exactly the positions that we will be taking as we go along. I mean, one of the things that we have insisted on doing is calling ourselves an ethical community landlord. Because we've only got 3 houses and 3 families who we've got to know pretty well as well. For us at this point, we haven't drawn all the lines out for what an ethical community landlord might be, and we'll have to do that now we're building up our housing stock. But it just means kind of standing with our people, which we've done already on several occasions, and being there for them, but also being there for the planet and for nature. And we want to bring nature into the East Marsh as well. It's really important. Over to you, Ben.
Ben, you're on mute.
Apologies. So yeah, this is a question that's come up from some other investors. So I'd say C is a minimum standard. This is an ongoing discussion, but again, I think positively, where the supporters and partners on the council are heavily involved as well. We've answered this question. I'm not going to get in terms of what we're doing, what we want to do. What I'd say is, I think if anyone wants to get in touch, happily share some more detail with them by email. Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that. So I'm just scrolling through some of the questions. Somebody wants your email, Ben. Rob. So I think you've seen that in the chat. So question. Well, I hope you can do 2 things at once, Ben. So I've got a question for you whilst you're typing. The question regards the legal entity of East Marsh Community. Did you say you set up a CBS for this investment project? Yeah, I can jump in on that, Billy. I think sure. So East Marsh United, the founder organisation, the community group that Billy described earlier, is a CIC, a community interest company. The people who set that up and the directors who set that up have also set up East Marsh Community Limited, which is a CBS, which has over 50 members now and is the entity raising capital to buy, refurbish, own and ethically let affordable homes. So that's the entity raising money. It's a CBS. It's got, well, I think over 100 members now with the investors we've had coming in so far, and that has 3 houses already on its balance sheet, and we'll be hopefully acquiring 10 more with everyone's help and investment. Brilliant, super. Thanks for that. Just got a couple more questions coming through. And they are separate. They're not subsidiaries. Okay, yeah. So the question was: is East Marsh United and East Marsh Community linked in any way legally? And the answer is they're not. They're separate entities. Okay. So back to you, Billy. I wanted to, Ben was talking about one of the key things that they look at when supporting an organisation like yours is the feasibility of the planning, the credibility of the management team, and obviously there are big ticks in that box. So getting up to 10 houses, I mean, I can see that's not much of a stretch. Getting up to 100 houses, I mean, that could be transformational for your organisation and for East Marsh. And I sort of appreciate that's a bit of a vision of the future, but I'd be really interested to hear what sorts of thoughts you have about that, and whether, Ben, in your experience, you've seen organisations develop like that in the past. So for us, one of the reasons we're doing this is obviously to provide homes for people here on the East Marsh, and to be a good, loving landlord for people as well, because people here don't get that very often, actually too often. So we're doing that. But what we're looking at is something under the kind of bucket line of 100 houses for 100 years, because what we've learned
as I said earlier, none of us came from a community background. We'd never been in a community group before. All this public community funding was completely new to us. And honestly, very practical working people, we looked at this landscape, a very confusing landscape of charity funding and things like this, and found it insane. I mean, you find a funding stream comes along, everybody tells you about it. So you look at this and you have to twist all your projects out of shape to fit the particular pot of money that they've got. You spend a month working on the documents for them, and then you either get it or you don't get it. And so, you know, you either succeed and so you can carry on, or you don't, and you've wasted all that time. But then again, the funding will run out in 2 or 3 years as well. So you're back on that same path. So for us, this seemed just crazy. And what we're doing here on the East Marsh seems to us worth properly funding. And so that we can become independent, our 100 houses will mean, okay, we get 100 houses for 100 families on the East Marsh, fantastic, to a really high standard. It also means that gives us a bit more power over what happens with the street architecture and so on. So we can bring in street trees and road calming and all these kinds of good things to help people, you know, feel a better life on the outside of the houses. But also at today's prices, it will bring our community group about £150,000 worth of rent revenue every year. Now, that will mean that our community group is secure for the ongoing future, because at the moment we're not. You know, we're constantly trying to reach out, and it's working, but we're still talking 2 or 3 years down the line, and then we have to do it again. And you spend all that time working on funding when you could be just doing the actual project work. And in terms of planning for this growth, well, I think what we've done all along is we've sort of, when you go on a hike, you know, you can see the mountain peak and then you kind of work out how to get there. But there are maps and there are people who have maps. So what we've found, again, in our experience, is that there's been some fantastic people out there that have really reached out to us and shown us the benefit of their knowledge and their experience. And I include, you know, Ben and Ethex in this now. So we're already talking to, there's a lovely, lovely man called John Geeson who's reached out to us. He's part of something called B3 Living. And he's got a lot of experience in scaled up housing projects, because that's the point, we need to scale up. So we're looking at that right now, and also with Jackie Wells, the housing officer from the council, is fantastic. I mean, it was Jackie that helped us midwife this whole project, and she's still standing there with us, and the council are standing behind us as well. So our next steps on this journey towards 100 houses for 100 years, which will leave East Marsh United or East Marsh Community standing for generations, rather than when, you know, I fall under a bus or whatever. So these are the plans, and we're already starting to work on them now. And I'm sure Ben will have more to say about that.
I mean, just on the chat, John Fitzmaurice has responded to everyone, and his organisation in Hull got to 100 properties. So it's, you know, it's been done. It can be done at Resonance. We've worked with and invested in lots of community land trusts and similar organisations developing affordable housing, community housing, all of which have succeeded. We've had no defaults. These organisations have got passionate memberships, committed investors, and all of them have paid back some of those loans we made some years ago now, have gone on to develop further schemes and so on. So it's just a model we're really passionate about. You know, for me and for East Marsh, you know, the key is now, you know, take it steadily, but to get those next 10 houses, get to 13 houses, you know, as quickly, as sensibly as possible. start paying shareholders a return as soon as possible on their investment. You know, it's an investment for good, but we want to give them a reasonable return on their investment. And I think once we've achieved that additional track record, I think then the sky's the limit in the East Marsh. You know, it could be an open offer on Ethex, some sensible levels of bank debt as well, hiring some people. As Billy says, there'll be a surplus then generated for East Marsh, you know, after all financial obligations have been met. And I think then the sky's the limit.
Yeah, brilliant. That's a fantastic answer. Ben, I don't know. Do you want to? There's a question from Peter. I'm not going to mention his surname. He's talking about, in terms of the withdrawable shares. In one place, the document says that withdrawals will be capped at 5% of the share capital after the initial 2 years. Elsewhere, it says that withdrawals of 2% will be budgeted for. Could you possibly elaborate on the difference? Also, to confirm that interest payments are not indexed to inflation. Is that a bit of a mouthful? Can you sort of?
Yeah, no, I can see that. Yeah, so look, I mean, initially, East Marsh are going to be wanting to spend every pound they get on property, right? There's a lot of property available with their partners at the council. They're already looking at new property, you know, that can be ready to go to be purchased and refurbished, you know, as soon as the money's allocated from this offer. But they're also conscious that, as we said, that they want to pay a decent return to investors, that 4% return from 1st of November 23, and allow for withdrawals as well.
But that's the normal community benefit society, isn't it? To have what we call withdrawable share capital. But the point being is that most of the capital stays within the business, because that's what provides the security for East Marsh Community in order to do their job, basically.
That's right. And in terms of the difference, I mean, we budgeted for 2%, about £20,000 worth of withdrawals a year from a few years' time. But I think policy as well, with Marilyn, that their expert accountant at East Marsh, will be to try and hold, you know, in the future 5%, a minimum of 5% in cash. 5%.
Yeah, and that's really there to provide some liquidity, isn't it, for, you know, if an investor's circumstances change, for instance.
So hopefully, less than that will be.
Sorry, Ben, you say?
No, sorry, Paul. I didn't mean to interrupt. So I was saying, yeah, look, hopefully we won't, you know, we'll be able to keep more capital in the business and get to these 100 houses, but we'll.
Yeah, it's a long-term investment, right? It's to, you know, absolutely get the impact. Okay, well, we have gone past 1 o'clock. We can continue. I mean, there are a couple more things. But I feel like we've got we've had a good dive into both, you know, what is the context of East Marsh and what's the business model, why is residents supporting the issue, what does the offer look like. So, you know, well, we do have one question which I might just put to Billy and to Ben, and it's talking about reaching potential investors. So obviously Ethex is a platform that has a base of investors, and we primarily use, you know, that base plus events like this, social media, digital marketing, and other campaigns to reach our investors. We also have matched funding. Billy, you have a great supporter in the chairman of Grimsby Football Club, I understand. Be interested to hear about how he's supporting the issue as a community member and also as an investor, and if that's okay. And then, you know, maybe to just talk a little bit about how you're working with the local community to gather support for the offer. And then we can we'll cap off questions now, and then I'll wrap up once Billy and Ben have had a chance to answer.
Yeah, so Jason Stockwood, who bought Grimsby Town Football Club, was born in Grimsby, in a council house in Nunsthorpe, a kind of comparable ward, yon side of Grimsby. And he's done well for himself with internet work and in online insurance business, Simply Business, I think it was. And he's done really well and has found himself at a juncture in his life where he wants to give back, and he wants to give back in terms of his hometown. But he's doing it differently in terms that he's looking at supporting grassroots community groups to kind of strengthen themselves, to pull themselves up and to build up their resilience and capacity. Because the overall idea, Grimsby-wide, is to build up a civic pride, which I do think has been missing, and to help the community to start working through some of the barriers and blockages that have been kind of, inherited from over the years. So Jason's big idea, which I think is genius, is to put together community, business, politics, i.e. council as well, and academia. And the project is called Home Win, which I didn't realise was a football metaphor, but because I don't follow football all that much. But it's a fantastic project, and it's running across many, many different ways. And the football club itself is geared towards supporting the community. So that's what Jason is doing. And Jason's putting in as an anchor investment £10,000 every time we reach £100,000. So it really boosts our bid. I would say in terms of the locale, we've got sort of two bids on the go, if you like. There's our key bid through Ethex, but we don't want to exclude anybody local, any of our members that are strapped for cash, and a lot of us are. So we've also got an alternative bid, which we're managing. We've sort of putting the dotting the I's and crossing the T's still at the moment, but we'll sort that out this week or next, where people can invest from £10 to £249, because the Ethex one starts at £250. And in terms of promoting all of this, we've also got Jason, but we've also got the Let's Dance web agency in Leeds, who are working very closely with us, and they are absolutely brilliant, and they've really, really helped us with our social and mainstream media offers as well.
Brilliant. That's a great answer. Thanks, Billy. Ben, did you have,
Yeah, just quickly, so that local offer that Billy described, that's just for people in Grimsby, to encourage local membership and local shareholdings, grow membership in the CBS locally, for people who may not be able to afford to put £250 in, which is the minimum through Ethex. Just like to finish with match funding, if that's all right, Paul. So yeah. Jason has also committed to invest £50,000 in this share offer. He's putting £20,000 so far, with another £30,000 of match funding to come. As Isla's explained, and thanks to Co-ops UK, we've got another £25,000 committed in terms of match funding. That's not yet on the totalizer. So I guess we'd just like to say to investors, there's at least hopefully at least another £55,000 of match funding. We think probably quite a bit more than that again. So, by investing now, we pretty certain we'll hit our minimum with every pound put in, doubled up.
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Really makes a big difference in match funding for sure. So I'd like to say many thanks to everybody on the webinar today for all the questions and for staying with us and showing your interest. I hope you got a really good understanding of both the immediate impact that East Marsh Community is going to have, as well as the longer term potential and that in resonance, they have a very, very, very good partner on the business side and the financial model that's got a strong track record. So, you know, we feel, you know, very comfortable with it. And just please look out for the email coming to you with a recording, with a link to the recording of this and some links to documents on the website. And all that it remains for us to say on behalf of myself, Ben and Billy, is thank you very much for your time and good afternoon.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.